And of course, it definitely it again illuminates the ethno-linguistic tensions in terms of the social memory, not so much in terms of political memory, as there is still, official, very strong consensus. There's no documents trying, to reinterpret what was said in the early 1990s about, and that applies to all the Baltic states actually. No significant changes, but on the societal level, you can see these tensions, of course, because if we come back to Latvia, then the anti-Soviet consensus is much stronger among Latvians, whereas Russian speakers, and we could discuss with Deniss here, of course, and I don't know, it's really a pity that we don't have anyone from Estonia, because I have some sociological data I'm relying on, where really we can see these different strengths of the consensus vis-a-vis the Soviet period, while Latvians, like really majority of Latvians, are very anti-Soviet when it comes to what happened in the 1940s. I'm not speaking about the very everyday life of the late Soviet period. That's a different issue. But when it comes to very political questions, then it's a clear answer. It was occupation. And then among Russian speakers, there is a more salient fluctuation in attitude. For example, there's a significant group of Russian speakers who have very hesitant attitude, saying that, okay, it was not a voluntary accession, meaning the USSR, but it was not also occupation, and this very hesitant, multi-directional memory, if you like, but maybe this time, maybe very ironically multi-directional, that they try to avoid any particular attitude at all, and are not identifying with any of these narratives, with pro-Soviet or anti-Soviet. So Russian-speaking community, of course, is more divided, therefore, than Latvians in terms of how history is brought on the scene now in terms of what is happening in the region. I think maybe I will stop here, and we can come back to some particular issue then. For the Lithuanian case.
Yeah, so please, Professor Mažeikis.
Yeah, I will talk a little bit differently, but partly coincide with what was said actually about global insecurity. But you know that I will start from this metaphor of Timothy Snyder, Bloodland, which he applied this metaphor not only for Baltic actually states, but for all Central Eastern Europe region, which partly coincide with the so-called socialist camp. And I'd like to check the another possibilities where our history of this Central Eastern Europe coincide, and what kind of the another metaphors we could choose. One of them is, if you will check different historical researches, it will be a serf land. It means that all these countries, the same countries which is under the metaphor bloodland, coincide with serf land. Serfs, it's a system of serving to menos, to owners of great country states. The system of serfdom was touched mostly this Central Eastern region for a long time, and in the Poland or Lithuania, partly in all the other Baltic countries, it's until the end of 19th century, and it's a very important issue, because you know that if you will check the pop culture in Lithuania, just this kind of popular memory is absent, because people don't like to remember this serfdom, but from the another side, there is always some kind like a threat of serfdom, because Russia, contemporary Russia, tries always to remember for Lithuanians, you are not, you know, children of Grand Duchy of Lithuania. You are just serfs who were serfs, or even sometimes even in Poland, that some Poles who imagine themselves like a Magnus, they call Lithuanians, you are serfs. You know, that is memory of serfs is actually, it's traumatic memory, but it's such kind of memory which is always hidden under official claiming about heroic nation and heroic wars. And this serfdom, the rhetoric of serfdom is ordinarily used for completely other propaganda, even propaganda purposes, in order to show that the lack of state experience or the lack of will, or vice versa, to show that you have some memory of rebellions against Magnus, against lords, and actually there is such kind of memory from the maybe 16th century in Lithuania, where every 50 years our peasants rebelled against some power, or Grand Duchy of Lithuania or Russian Empire. And it was very bloody rebellions. And I just would like to compare a little bit these rebellions with expression of Alexander Pushkin from Captain's Daughter. Quote, "God forbid we should ever witness a Russian revolt, senseless and merciless." That is, senseless and merciless. In a Lithuanian case, they get some sense and mercy. That's, it means that when we are talking about transcultural collaboration and adaptation of cultures, I would say that Lithuanians on the level of Serbs, they adapt Russian experience, they just add to senseless rebellion some sense, or to merciless rebellion some mercy. Just
mercy.
Yeah, mercy. Yeah, some mercy. Then another actually that I mentioned this serfland coincide with the bloodland, but in Lithuanian case this bloodland means that if you will check statistics of war between Lithuania and Russia, or Žečpospolita and Russia, ordinarily it happens every 30 years, sometimes every 20, sometimes every 40 years. So look, now it's even the time, because the 25 years of independence, it's a time to think that about statistics or data. It's actually very dangerous, I would say, it, and terrible statistic, but in a way all Lithuanian historians remember it. And what does mean history in this sense? What is it? History some kind of science, or just factory of new war and blood conflicts? And the role of historians in this bloodland is very important. As you remember, Churchill one time said that about Balkan countries, not about Baltic countries, that Balkan countries produced too much history. They produced even more than could consume. And this and Churchill meant that historians, not only historians and creators of myth, they produce so many history that this history is some discourse with explain and legitimize internal and external wars. It means that there's such kind of memory that every 20, 25 or 50 years Lithuania had some war with Russia, that this one memory is the factory or machine which could produce new conflicts, because everybody remember about it, and historians would like to remember us, look, the time is, And it means that we could just even vulnerarize, just support this intention through multi-level television, through creative industries, through edition of new historian books, through historical conferences, through evidences. And sometimes Lithuanians even say, look, this war between Ukraine and Russia means between Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Russia. It's really the war started now. Just we not falsify that this tendency looks. Yeah, it works. That another, if you will compare this Blood land with the so-called Gulag land, this map again coincides. Gulag land, I mean from Goli Otok of Yugoslavia to the classical Gulag in Russia. But what does mean this Gulag? Gulag are very different system, according to Solzhenitsyn or Varlam Shalamov or the other researchers from memorial movement in Russia, that Gulag was an organic system, differently from concentration camps that was a mechanic system. Organic system presupposes that every keeper of a prison or every supervisor of prison could start to be a prisoner and vice versa. And it happens every year. It means if you will check, Solzhenitsyn did he collected some data and you could check all of them, how many former leaders of Gulag system, I mean supervisors and keepers, how many of them started to be prisoners later. 99.99% of them. All of them started to be prisoners and vice versa. Some of prisoners, like Varlam Shalamov, start to be official in Gulag system because he spent somewhere 30 years and was quite skilled in this from this period because he survived. And it means that this system was very interesting, and many of Russian researchers, they emphasize that Gulag system was origin even probably in Oprichnik in the Ivan Terrible time, when all noblemen and serfs were interpreted as serfs. Everybody in Russia was serf, except Tsar. It means that serfs were separated only by some level of serfdom. It means that everybody is serfs, but differently. And it means that the changing of positions was all time. That the changing of positions was all time possible. All time possible. And you know that this Gulag system touched all these Soviet camp countries and did a very big impact to develop the same new self-consciousness. The another model is nomenclature. That according Milovan Džilas in Yugoslavia or Nikolai Vaslevsky in Russia, nomenclature is some kind of party bureaucracy rebellion against Gulag system. It means that nomenclature didn't like to be changed into another position. They didn't like to be under threat to be prisoner in any moment. And they would like to build a little bit more stable situation under this threat to be in Gulagian consciousness. And this nomenclature period, beginning from 1964, from this quartet of Brezhnev against Khrushchev in Kremlin, From this period, nomenclatures tried to build more or less a normal, safe position, safe situation. And what is very interesting now that Russian propaganda ordinarily tried to build some kind of creative revisionism. Creative revisionism presupposed to remember for all people only the beautiest, the gold Soviet Union. It means to remember them some best features from nomenclature period. And even to show nomenclature as an example of good life. So there is on this terrible side of Baltic and Central Eastern European countries' history, there is some kind of positive story. One of them is to show that how these manners or noblemen were wonderful in the period of Grand Duchy of Lithuania or in Estonian, between Estonian and Latvian barons. And the another example is actually Soviet or Russian example to show how this period of nomenclature for nomenclature was a good period. And to show it as some kind of heroic and good time under the threat that, look, you are just probably serfs from the history, but you could remember your another story when you were nomenclature and you was quite completely successful nomenclature. Would you like to return to this good time, good period? Creative revisionism, it's very interesting topic because it means communism without communist, or it means Marxist state without Marxism-Leninism, or it means some nomenclature without memory about Gulag, or about without this one's threats. And I would say that because the question was about global insecurity in Baltic countries, I would say that this global insecurity has very different features in Central Eastern Europe. And this global insecurity is built on the memory, and the memory of serfdom, bloodland, Gulag land, and nomenclature story. All these stories all time influence thinking of people. And there are fifth position, it's a creation of new, something new. It's through the critique of history, through the critique of historical manufacturing, through the building of new identity about new ideology about EU. Thank you.
Oh, very interesting. Because May 9th is just a couple of weeks away, I would like to remind some statistics, which tells me that May 9th before 2015 was very much a matter of political correctness from the Baltic states perspective and from the Western European perspective. In 2005, when in Moscow, in the Red Square, Russia was celebrating the 60th anniversary of the victory against the fascist Germany, Estonian president Tomas was not elected yet. Arnold Rüter, who was the president at that time, did not attend in Moscow, although he was a former communist. And it seemed like he was in a very good company with Valdas Adamkus, who did not attend either. However, Vaira Vike Freiberger attended, and
Latvian president.
Yes, Latvian president. She attended, and it seemed like the Baltic states are not unanimous regarding the May 9th as the victory day. Now, in 2010, for the 65th anniversary of the victory of the World War II, Tomas who was elected Estonian president, he attended. Vairo Freiberger no longer in office, but Valdis Zatlers, Latvian president, attended. Dalia Grybauskaitė, Lithuanian president, did not attend. So two Baltic state presidents attend in Moscow 5 years ago, one not. Now for this one, in 2015, Estonian and Latvian and Lithuanian unanimously declared that they will not attend at all. So the statistics is changing. So my question to the panel is, does it mean that May 9th is about political correctness according to geopolitical tensions, but not because of sacred memory?
In the Latvian case, it was definitely geopolitics. If we keep in mind that in 2005, Vytautas Freiberger excellently used the possibility to go to Moscow and to all international media explain the tragedy of the Baltic states, what happened in the World War II. She used it perfectly, this opportunity given by Putin. So, I mean, it was definitely for geopolitical considerations she went there. But actually, even this year, our president was the most hesitant whether to go or not to go. So still this kind of trend, to think about maybe to go, maybe it would be good for the country, for the economy of country to do this symbolic gesture, to go there in a red square together with the head of the North Korea, commemorate the victims of World War II and democracy, of course celebrate democracy and other things. But no, and I think actually even I heard that the president of Israel is also not going there. Is it true? Is there someone from Israel? I think I read that even the president, which is a really slap, in the face, that even the president of Israel is not going to this 17th anniversary event on the 9th of May. But I'm not sure, maybe a very high-standing official at least then.
I would say that in Lithuanian case you see so very big stability, but from the other side you could call it frozen diplomacy. Frozen diplomacy means that all time is the same, nothing changed. That we under the we just stay in the period of ceasefire, I would say. Because there is no hot war with Russia, but that imagined ceasefire. And ceasefire presupposes that we don't have any relationships. It's frozen diplomacy, no diplomacy more. But actually there is no hot war as well. I'm not sure that it is a very good position from a diplomatic viewpoint. Because if you will look, if you will compare with the Latvian case or even Estonian, you will see some kind of dynamics here. Sometimes they go, sometimes no. That change. That we are very stable, just frozen.
But I want to remind you about this sacred thing. Remember the Zeman case. Now, I think a few weeks ago, that Miloš Zeman, his reaction towards this ambassador of the United States, that he's not welcome to his castle because of United States.
Czech president.
Yeah, Czech president, because of United States officially, publicly call for not attending the event of the 9th May in Moscow. And there was actually quite sharp tension. There's not just the Baltic case, of course.
Well, in my opinion, the 9th of May has become a kind of political resource or currency. Also this year showing that it's not only the West which feels under threat or the Baltic states, but it is also used and abused also by Russian government, because recently when I followed the debates of the working group in Russia, which is preparing the celebrations, and Putin has attended the meetings of this group. So in the protocol of these debates, it is actually the language of the Cold War or the Soviet-style anti-American propaganda, and I really had a déjà vu feeling that I'm reading some kind of Soviet newspapers which I was forced to work with as a pioneer in the school, as we have been debating the horrors of the American imperialism. The Minister for Foreign Affairs of Russia, Lavrov, said that we are trying to work on the celebrations which should be celebrated by everyone who is progressive in this world, by the aggressive core of the countries of the European Union and the United States, whom he calls Americans, are trying to spoil this festival and this preparation. So I think these threats have become a kind of common resource which is being very easily used by both sides, and I think in this case we are indeed, in the, at least linguistically and in propaganda way, we are back into the Cold War, and this also shows that this sacred date for many people who have suffered in the war has become just a resource for political games, because it is now on the one side in the Baltics. It is the clear answer that this was not the end of the war, but the beginning of the next occupation. And at the same time, Russia has also nationalized this Memory Day. It has now become a part of the great story of the revival of empire, because empire can suffer, and the war has been linked to massive suffering and also to some heroic deeds. And that's why actually the European dimension of fighting against Nazi regime is now disappearing, and I think this is what concerns the culture of memory. Is one of the greatest losses of this second Cold War, because we are forgetting that it was European experience of fighting against regime which actually tried to destroy European humanism culture. That one of the totalitarian regimes was fighting together with Western allies against the Nazi regime has done nothing to foster the debates in contemporary Russia. And I think this is where empire begins, when you actually close your channels for debating your history. And I think the short period in the 80s and the beginning of Yeltsin period, it was a unique time for Russia to open up archives, to face Gulag experience, which was not just an extraterrestrial evil, but this evil was carried out and consented to by many people. So this period is now over, and actually I'm quite skeptical about the revival of critical debates about Russia's history, because if we quote Kopasov, you can't really criticize war if war is a collective people's act of heroic deeds. So if you do it, you are actually against the people, against the refoundation of the collective memory. And this is how political power can easily exclude everyone who is trying to critically deconstruct the history of the war.
I just would like to add a little bit again about Gulag in our days. It means that if we will check the history of the prison camp Perm 36, it's one of the major political prison camp for political prisoners in the Soviet period, and it was actually one of the camp of Gulag, archipelago Gulag. And from the beginning of 90s, Memorial started to transform this one camp into the International Museum for Gulag prisoners and for political persecution. And in the last time, Moscow Kremlin, the advisor of Putin, Volodin and the others, they decided that this system should be transformed. And now Perm 36 is Museum of Gulag Administration. A Museum of Gulag Administration, it's the moment to show how these supervisors were good in a war with Banderovцы with one on saw, with Baltic political separatists, with different political criminals. So it's the place where young generation should learn how to fight against external and internal enemies. So you see this transformation of Gulag memory 180%. It's amazing, and actually it's, this is the why I mentioned that post-Gulagian memory until now is very, very urgent in this region.
But just to avoid some dichotomies, I mean, in Latvia, for example, even if you see this very salient and clear ethno-linguistic division line again in terms of the to celebrate 9th of May or 8th of May, because 8th of May